Coming up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at noon, denouncing Japan for not repenting on its past wrongdoings. Korea's foreign minister strongly urges Tokyo to compensate the victims of wartime sexual slavery. The Virginia House of Delegates completes the legislative process mandating all school textbooks to use the Korean name of East Sea as well as Sea of Japan to describe the body of water separating Korea and Japan. The state governor says he will sign the bill into law. Plus, the Korean government unveils plans to double merger and acquisition deals over the next 3 years to help startups grow into global titans. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thank you for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Ojin in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Korean Foreign Minister Yun Byungse has demanded Tokyo admit to its sexual enslavement of Korean women during the Second World War and make efforts for an early resolution of the issue.
Speaking at a UN session in Geneva Wednesday, Korea's top diplomat also slammed Japanese officials for their attempts to whitewash the nation's past wrongdoings. Our Hwang Seung-hee has the details.
Speaking before the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Wednesday, South Korean Foreign Minister Yun Byungse urged Japan to take responsibility and compensate the victims of its wartime sexual slavery. Calling for an end in sexual violence in armed conflicts, he noted violations that took place in the past in which the perpetrators have yet to repent, pointing to the so-called comfort women as a living evidence.
This is an added insult to the honor and dignity of those victims who had weathered physical and psychological pains in the lifelong haunted memories. Such an attitude is an affront to humanity and disregards the historical truth.
An estimated 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were used as sex slaves by the Japanese army in the early 20th century. This marks the first time since 2006 that a top diplomat from Korea is attending the UN Human Rights Council session, and the first time ever the comfort women issue was raised, a sign that Seoul is serious about tackling the matter.
The starting point of the prevention of human rights violations is for countries to admit past wrongdoings, take responsibility for such deeds, and educate the correct history to the future generations.
Referring to comments recently made by Japanese Vice Education Minister, who claimed the Japanese military's use of sex slaves is a fabricated story, Minister Yun stressed the importance of educating correct history. Minister Yun also touched upon a recent UN report on North Korea's human rights violations and expressed hopes it will lead to practical steps for improving human rights conditions in the regime. Top diplomats from around 50 nations attended the UN Human Rights Council session, but Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida was not present. Hwang Seung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, over in the U.S., another huge step was made in the push for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and the Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. Park Ji-won tells us more.
The so-called East Sea Bill has passed the Virginia House of Delegates, the last phase of the legislative process, in an 82-16 vote. The bill requires all textbooks approved by the Board of Education to note that the Sea of Japan is also referred to as the Korean name East Sea. As the bill passed the state Senate in January, it now only requires the governor's signature for it to become law. Governor Terry McAuliffe is expected to sign the bill by early April at the latest, and the bill will take effect from July 1st. The passing of the bill is a major victory for the state's estimated 82,000 Korean American residents. They had to overcome intense lobbying by the Japanese government, in which Tokyo warned it might reconsider Japanese investment in the state. The Korean American community in Virginia has been pushing hard for the change since the early 1990s. They, as well as all Koreans, view the Sea of Japan designation as an unpleasant reminder of Japan's brutal colonization of the Korean peninsula in the early to mid-20th century. The Korean-American community aims to further introduce the dual naming bill in U.S. states with high Korean-American populations like California, New York, and New Jersey. They ultimately hope to change the U.S. government's single name policy regarding sea names. The International Hydrographic Organization, or IHO, published a book designating official names of the seas in 1929. Japan registered the name Sea of Japan to refer to the body of water that separates Korea and Japan. However, as Korea was colonized by Japan back then, it had no way to voice its opposition on the world stage. The Korean government has been calling for the IHO to change the current single name of the sea to at least a dual naming, as the term East Sea has been used in Korea for thousands of years. 박지원, Arirang News.
North Korea has turned down South Korea's proposal for Red Cross working level talks. The North said through the Inter-Korean hotline on Thursday that a good atmosphere for discussing reunions of war-separated families has not been created. It also noted the issue of holding the reunions on a regular basis should not be discussed between Red Cross officials. Experts had earlier speculated the North would want to hold talks at a higher level. Seoul's unification ministry says it's currently reviewing what steps to take next. North Korea's response comes a day after the South offered to meet for Red Cross talks next Wednesday. North Korea is justifying its recent series of missile and rocket launches as defensive in nature. A statement released by the North Korean People's Army on Wednesday said the missile and rocket tests that started last week were conducted to protect the nation's airspace and territory. It added that the ongoing South Korea-US military exercises are provocative and that Pyongyang would fire off its most powerful rocket if it feels threatened. North Korea has fired off a number of Scud missiles and short-range projectiles using multiple rocket launchers over the past week or so. President Park Geun-hye has vowed to ensure there are no welfare blind spots in Korean society and to open an era of trust and peace on the Korean peninsula. Speaking at the annual National Prayer Breakfast on Thursday, President Park said Korea is at the point of having to lay the groundwork to take the next leap through economic and social innovation and achieve happiness and a peaceful reunification on the peninsula. In order to get there, the president said straightening out irregularities in society, including corruption and graft, would be a pressing matter. The Korean leader then said she will make sure every citizen has the means to fully achieve their potential and enjoy the fruits of economic growth.
In other news, the Korean government has unveiled its to-do list for its ambitious 3-year economic innovation plan. Some 60 tasks focused on balancing domestic demand and exports, boosting the R&D sector, and reforming public organizations. Kim Min-ji reports.
A total of 59 detailed tasks will back up the Korean government's 3-year economic innovation plan. Finance Minister Hyun Sak said during an economy-related ministers' meeting on Wednesday that they focus on removing excessive red tape in the name of growth and bolstering sluggish corporate investment. To accomplish the latter and boost venture businesses, the government first plans to offer bigger tax breaks for so-called angel investors, those who invest in startups. For example, angel investors would not be taxed for investments of up to 15 million won, or roughly $14,000 starting next year through 2017. The government also plans to provide financial support worth $880 million for 500 small and medium-sized businesses every year starting in 2015. Hyun said that the government is drawing up a package of measures aimed at easing regulations that hamper active participation of private equity funds in the mergers and acquisition market. The government will go through the task and economy-related ministers' meeting that takes place every week. It will also set up a separate task force team to monitor how well the tasks are being achieved. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, if we take a closer look at the three-year economic innovation plan, the Korean government has put great emphasis on lifting regulations as a means to boost corporate investment and venture startups. Many regulations, especially on Korean private equity firms, have been eased to hamper corporate merger and acquisition activities. Arirang News' Hwang Jie has the details.
Boosting mergers and acquisitions is standing out as one of the key agenda items in the three-year economic innovation plan laid out by the Park Geun-hye administration. The administration aims to create a virtuous circle where venture startups can grow into global companies through the active participation of private equity funds and strategic investors in the mergers and acquisitions market. Finance Minister Yun Byungse said Thursday that the government will streamline tax and financial support systems to remove regulations that hinder corporate M&A activities.
The government will expand the size of a growth fund for the merger and acquisition activities of venture firms and small and medium-sized companies to around $930 million within the next 3 years.
Hyun said, citing a local report, that the nation's M&A market could nearly double in 2017 from last year to $65 billion with the set of measures the government has laid out. To reach these goals, he emphasized the importance of M&A market participants like companies and investors making good use of the measures. The finance ministry said the local M&A market has continued to shrink after the global financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, while the size is smaller than those in other advanced economies. It added that a sluggish M&A market prevents the kind of voluntary business restructuring that allows companies to focus their investments on core areas. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
The chief of SK Group will step down from his post as chairman after being found guilty of embezzling company funds. This will remove the 53-year-old Choi Tae-won from management, but he will remain a major shareholder in the group, which is the country's third largest conglomerate. Choi was sentenced to a 4-year prison term last week for embezzling $47 million from company affiliates and using the money for personal investments in 2008. Choi is not the only conglomerate boss to step down after a corruption conviction. The chairman of Hanwha Group stepped down from executive positions at company affiliates last month after the courts found him guilty of corruption. The chairman of CJ Group is also expected to step down later this month for the same reasons. LG Electronics is quickly catching up to its smartphone rivals Samsung Electronics and Apple. The company rose to third in global smartphone sales last year, beating out companies like HTC and Sony, and jumping up from 6th in 2012. Market researcher Strategy Analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about $11.1 billion last year, which is about 4% of the industry's combined revenue. The rise in sales was attributed to the popularity of its high-end models, such as the Optimus G, G Pro, and G2 smartphones.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
High-level diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis in Ukraine failed to make much headway at talks in Paris on Wednesday. Washington and Moscow were unable to see eye to eye, while Russia refused to recognize the interim Ukrainian government. As our Connie Kim reports, the top diplomats of the two countries will continue talks on Thursday.
International efforts to resolve the crisis in Ukraine took baby steps forward in Paris Wednesday, with the United States and Russia agreeing to continue talks the next day, but no progress was made between Russia and the new Ukrainian government. Speaking after the meeting, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said talks with Russia will continue to try and de-escalate the crisis.
We agreed to continue intense discussions in the coming days with Russia, with the Ukrainians, in order to see how we can help normalize the situation, stabilize it, and overcome the crisis.
Kerry said he would meet Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov again in Rome on Thursday. However, discussions between Russia and Ukraine did not materialize, with Lavrov calling Ukraine's new government illegitimate. In Brussels, NATO announced there will be no talks with Moscow after Russian President Vladimir Putin refused to pull out Russian forces from Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula, where the tense standoff continues between pro-Russian forces and the Ukrainian military. NATO said it'll also back out from a joint mission linked to Syrian chemical weapons and help build the capacity of the Ukrainian military. Meanwhile, the European Union has unveiled a package of aid and grants to Ukraine's new government worth some $15 billion over the next couple of years. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Back here in Korea, opposition Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil and An Cho-soo of the New Political Vision Party will serve as co-leaders of their new coalition party. Making the announcement at a National Assembly briefing on Wednesday, a spokesperson said an equal number of lawmakers from each side will serve as the party's leadership, although the size of it has yet to be determined. Kim and An will make a final decision on how the new coalition will be launched as soon as Thursday. The surprise merger between the DP and the New Political Vision Party came on March 1st. Korea has a notorious reputation when it comes to people taking their own lives, with its suicide rate the highest in the OECD. New data released by Statistics Korea on Thursday shows the number of suicides has tripled in the past 2 decades to 28 people per 100,000 in 2012 from 8 per 100,000 in 1992. Korea's suicide rate has also risen at the fastest pace in the OECD, jumping by over 100% from 2000 to 2010. In contrast, Japan's suicide rate in the same period was at -5%. The data also shows the 1 in 5 Koreans who have committed suicide in the last 20 years did so due to financial difficulties.
Let's take a look at some sports news now. South Korea pulled off somewhat of a surprise Wednesday night, defeating Greece 2-0 in their own backyard. In their last friendly match before the World Cup finals begin in Brazil in June, Korea put the Greeks to the sword through 2 goals by Park Ju-young and Son Heung-min. Greece, who sit in a lofty 12th in the FIFA rankings, had several chances to score, hitting the goalpost once and the crossbar twice. With the latest victory, Korea, 61st in the FIFA rankings, stands at 5 wins, 6 losses and 3 draws since head coach Hong Myung-bo took over last June. A new school year has begun for many Korean students this week. More than 70% of high school graduates in Korea enter college, but not all of them attend what you call traditional universities. A growing number of them are going online to do their studies. Kwon So-ah reports.
Excitement is in the air at Seoul National University's orientation ceremony, where thousands of new young people are marking the start of student life. It's the same scene at another welcoming event for freshmen at another university. But here at Seoul Cyber University, students do not walk around the campus looking for their classrooms. They jump on the internet to take their classes. Moon So-yoon is a Cyber University sophomore. She graduated from a 2-year college program but became interested in counseling psychology and tried to find a way to balance a job and her studies.
The biggest advantage of taking Cyber University classes is that you have no restrictions as to time, location, or age.
So-yoon says sudden pop quizzes and discussions make the courses more interactive.
Many cyber universities do not limit their education to online classes, but give students the opportunity to take part in offline courses and activities at their offline campuses.
Professors say online classes are not only good for students, but for teachers as well.
For professors of offline universities, it's not easy to receive feedback or monitor yourself. And that goes for me too, as I've worked at conventional universities for 10 years. But since my classes are now filmed, I can get concrete feedbacks.
There were only 9 cyber universities in Korea in 2001. Today, there are 21. The number of cyber students is on the rise too, jumping from 6,000 in 2001 to nearly 115,000 in 2013. Experts attribute the jump to the increasing number of students pursuing lifelong education. Much lower tuition prices have also played a role. However, cyber universities still face challenges compared to brick-and-mortar institutions.
Some areas their quality is down. In terms of their degree programs and the methodology of teaching and learning and their job skills, etc.
Despite the self-evident figures and the increasing popularity of cyber universities, it will take time for them to develop the respect afforded to conventional schools. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Good day, I'm Eunice Kim, and here are your headlines from around the world. We'll begin at the Red Sea, where a ship carrying dozens of advanced Syrian-produced rockets was stopped by the Israeli Navy. Israel said the M302 rockets were sent by Iran and ultimately bound for Palestinian guerrillas in the Gaza Strip and could be used to strike deep into Israel. Hamas has dismissed the accusations, and the seizure comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in the United States pushing for tougher international action against Iran. Crossing over to Egypt now, a trial of journalists accused of aiding terrorists has resumed. In all, 20 people stand accused of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, which was labeled a terrorist group in December of last year. The trial is being closely watched as a barometer of Cairo's posture toward freedom of the press. Among the groups standing trial include 9 Al Jazeera journalists and a former BBC correspondent. Defendant Mohammed Fadel Fahmy, Al Jazeera's Canadian Egyptian bureau chief, shouted journalists are not terrorists before the hearing began. In India, the country's election commission has confirmed parliamentary elections will begin on April 7th and will conclude on May 15th with the vote count. The poll to elect a new lower house of Lok Sabha has attracted the largest number of registered voters of 814 million people, a world record. The elections will pit the ruling Congress party against the main opposition Bharatiya Janata Party, and if a clear majority is not reached, minor parties could play a larger role in legislative affairs. And on to a different kind of poll. A survey conducted by a French daily, which was never published but leaked, found that more than half, some 56% of the French polled, chose former IMF Director Dominique Strauss-Kahn as the better choice to incumbent President François Hollande to lead the country. The survey was pulled by Le Parisien, reportedly due to editorial reasons. Strauss-Kahn was widely anticipated to run in the 2012 presidential election against incumbent Nicolas Sarkozy, but a 2011 arrest for sexually assaulting a hotel maid in the U.S. forced him to resign from the IMF. The case was settled, but he is currently facing other legal battles in France for aggravated pimping. And we're consuming too much sugar. That's what the World Health Organization is saying as it revised down its recommended sugar intake to below 10% of a person's total daily calorie intake, with a target of 5%. That applies to natural sugars as well as those added to foods, and the change comes in a new draft measure by the WHO, and as much of the developed world grapples with rising obesity levels.
Good afternoon. Well, it's sunny but cold and dry on this Thursday afternoon, and the cold wave advisory is still in effect for the mountainous areas on Gangwon-do, and dry weather watch has been expanded as of 11 a.m. this morning to most inland regions. And yes, we've had a cold start to the day, and it will be a bit chillier than yesterday. But according to East Asian calendars, today is Gyeongchip, which marks the day that frogs and insects insects come out of their winter hibernation because spring is right around the corner. But it looks like they may have to sleep for a couple more days because it will be colder on Friday. The morning lows will drop to -5 here in Seoul, but things should get warmer starting Saturday, jumping back to seasonal averages. So till then, let's stay warm to avoid catching a cold. So please do keep that in mind. And here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will get up to 5, while Daegu and Gwangju rise to 8, while Busan tops out at 9. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju and Daejeon will climb up to 8 and 7 respectively, while the top temperature among Gyeonggang will be at -1. Now that's all for me today, and let's send it back to Jinju and Mark in the studio.
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful weather report there, Jian. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Join us again for more updates on the day's headlines on our next newscast at 2 p.m. Korea time.
And Jinju and I will be back again at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.